hey, will I die if I run a marathon without training? And you're like,
Yeah.
unlikely.
Faster than a speeding bullet.
I ran until my muscles burned and my veins pumped battery acid.
More powerful than a locomotive.
An idea is like a virus, resilient, highly contagious.
Able to leap tall buildings in a single bound.
Today's episode is brought to you by betterhumanology.com, the free membership website brought to you by Into3 Fitness. Head over to betterhumanology.com and claim your free membership and get instant access to training programs, audio lessons, mental toughness training, ebooks, and more. Hey guys, Jared Moon here, and thank you for joining me in the very first episode number 1 of the Better Humanology podcast. Today we'll be talking to PJ Newton. PJ is the director of training for CrossFit Endurance. He's also the founder of Strategic Athlete. We're going to be talking to him about running marathons without training, the best way to add strength training to an endurance program, running form, go ruck challenges, mental toughness, programming, and all sorts of ways that you can become a better human. And every time I have a conversation with PJ, I get something out of it, so I know this conversation will be very beneficial for me and for you guys as well. So without any further ado, let's talk to PJ. All right, man, then I will go ahead and start with you telling us a little bit about your fitness background or your background in general. I know you're in the Marine Corps tank captain, is that right?
Yep. So yeah, I was I got my notes here on a little cheat sheet so I don't forget who I am. Right? So I was a Marine officer for 9 years, and I was an armor guy, so I was on tanks, which is pretty cool. Did that from 2002, graduated in 2005, and then went right to TBS, and then to the fleet with that stuff. So what else? Fitness background stuff. I was so in the Marine Corps I was a martial art instructor, which is pretty cool. So I got into a lot of kind of the functional fitness stuff with that. I originally started going down this kind of functional fitness route, that led me towards, my CrossFit life that I'm going to talk about in a minute, with my first dragon door kettlebell back in 2000, which is nobody even knew what a kettlebell was back in 2000. Right. And I'm I got my first one pood kettlebell in the mail, and I was I can't believe I just paid $70 for shipping of this stupid lead weight. So with that, between that and just kind of some of the off the wall stuff they were doing with the martial art program at the time, because it was a brand new Marine Corps martial art program. I was kind of in the right place at the right time to get certified as an instructor there, and kind of keep going down the functional fitness route a little bit, which is cool. So, oh man, what else did I do? Did the whole Marine thing, went to Southern California, moved down to Temecula. I got promoted to captain, moved down to Temecula to take over a company in Camp Helen. And that's when I started driving by a CrossFit gym every day, going to Team Quest, Dan Henderson's gym. I was doing Muay Thai and getting punched in the head by 15-year-olds. So by that point, I'd been CrossFitting for probably a year and a half, 2008-ish. Kind of in the gym, in my garage with my little thrown together Sports Authority weight bench and weights, and kind of doing the garage gym thing that you're popularizing, and ended up getting certified in 2009 with the level 1, and then just caught the bug. I stopped in that gym one day coming back from getting punched too many times, and just hey, I got this piece of paper that I paid $800 for, and can I intern? And they're like, sure, and brought me in, and they both worked for headquarters, so I was super lucky. So I just between hookups and meeting people and all that kind of thing, I ended up with a whole bunch of other certificates, and just kind of caught the bug at that point, and happened to get in a really good shape at the same time, which is strange, right? And all my military fitness tests and stuff got easier and easier, and I'm not even running anymore. This is amazing, and I'm getting faster, and I'm getting stronger, and I'm not even doing sit-ups and strict pull-ups, and I'm getting better, and I'm getting and I'm crushing it. And yes, so that kind of led me into learning that if you offer anybody a tank ride, you can get pretty much anything you want. So an offer of a tank ride later, and Brian McKenzie from CrossFit Endurance was on my tank ramp teaching my Marines how to run. And I was like, hey, this stuff's really cool. And I was already kind of bought into the CFE template for military guys, right? Because military athletes need to do more than just a regular CrossFit workout. They need to do more than just a strength program, because they have these endurance requirements, from the cardiorespiratory side of things to the muscular endurance side of things. Like, they're going to have to run, they're going to have to ruck, they're going to have to swim, depending on what they do. And that model fit really, really well with like a well thought out kind of CFE program for military dudes. So I kind of latched onto him and started just kind of showing up to things that he was at, and, being around and being helpful, and interned a couple of seminars, assistant coached a couple of seminars, probably assistant coach 10 less seminars than the average person, and then got moved up to a head coach spot for their military and law enforcement seminars, which were big back before all the money in the military dried up. We were getting like just 25 dudes that, the command would pay for to come out to a CFE seminar at $500 a head or whatever it was. So I was running those until I left the Marine Corps in 2012. That was a long time ago. Now it seems like it was forever ago.
Yeah. I remember I met you like 14 days after you separated or something.
That's right. Yeah. No, it was. I moved. It was crazy. That was a crazy month. It was like the end of June. I moved back to Phoenix from California, and then I drove back out to San Diego that weekend. Like, the moving truck came to the house. I unloaded it with the movers, and then I left it off to my wife, and I was like, I'm going to a level 1 in San Diego, and I went and interned at a level 1 as a coach for them. And then I came back. We started unpacking boxes, got all that stuff, got the house 30% settled, and I was like, all right, we're going to the games, and off we went to the CrossFit Games. Yeah, and that's where I met you. Yeah, man, it seems like it was so long ago, but it really wasn't, right?
Yeah, not too long ago.
So, yeah. But since then I took over as the director of training for CrossFit Endurance, which is just a big fancy word for I do all the stuff that Brian doesn't want to do. But that includes programming all the workouts for the website. I've been doing that since probably end of 2012. Because it was right after the games I got asked to kind of do that. So end of 2012, I started programming all the workouts, and then kind of took over the whole shebang end of last year, 2013. So I'm coming up on what is it now, November? Yeah, I'm just over a year kind of running the show for Brian and the CrossFit Endurance crew, mentoring coaches, running interns, marketing everything, developing training programs and selling that stuff, and and that kind of thing. So it's been a lot of fun. It's been interesting with kind of some of the changes in the CrossFit world, and a lot of the seminars not getting the attendance that they used to, just as we're kind of saturating the market with $600 seminars.
Yeah.
And not only that, but there's just so much other stuff for people to do now on the weekends, in local competitions, and then the open and regionals and games is like a 15-month deal now, right? Like, it's never ending.
And the MPGL.
And then the grit and there's all these things that compete now with it, that it's been an interesting challenge to kind of keep up the the seminars and stuff. So yeah, man, what else? That's a long bio, right?
It's good though. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
I have seen a lot of changes. I've been following CrossFit Endurance for a long time, since before you took kind of the head spot as the trainer. Yeah. I've seen a lot of changes. So you guys have a lot of programs now that you have on your website that you didn't have before. Are you the dude behind most of those programs?
Yeah, a lot of them for sure. Mainly, I don't. It's kind of a thing. I had to twist Brian's arm to get one-off training programs up on the website for sale, because I understand why. I'm totally with him. Any one training program is not good for any particular person. Right. It's still kind of general. And if you look at any of these things, if the people are smart about it and they're being honest, they're like, hey, listen, this works really well, but it works really well for 90% of the people. there's still like 10% that like your goals might be a little different. You might need a different program. You might need some specific attention and that kind of thing. You can't sell anybody a training program and say like, this is it. This will get everybody to run a marathon in 2.5 hours. Like that doesn't exist.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, that's what I tell, like, to coach in seminars, I'm like, listen, I've got options, right? That I can facilitate some different options. I can give you some ideas, like, but I don't have the answer to any of this stuff. And I make the joke all the time. Like, if I had the answer, I would drive a nicer car, because like I would, you think you would get the answer to all endurance training for $600 in 2 days of your time? Like, not going to happen, like, because it's just way too valuable if anyone has the answer, and that doesn't exist. So, but there's a big demand for it, and people wanted them and people like them. So what we did to kind of get around that was, for the training bundles on there, we've got the ultimate bundle, which gets you all of the programs, and then the marathon bundle, which gets you like the skills and drills program, the marathon, stuff like that. We give people access to our private Facebook group, and then we've got some coaches in there, and so you get access to some coaches, and you can ask some questions, and you can tweak some plans, and you can get some feedback and stuff like that. So, which has been super cool. We've got like 120 members in there now that are just, posting their results and all kinds of things. And it's really neat.
That's really awesome. And
yeah,
luckily I had access to you, and I'm going to use that kind of as a transition to our first topic on training for marathons, because and some of my readers know about it. Depending on how long they've been reading.
I quote this one-line email all the time to people.
I emailed PJ when I was going to run a marathon with absolutely no training. I actually looked at my training log and had run I think 2 1-mile sprints in the last 365 days, on top of doing some high intensity stuff and strength training. And then I contacted him and I was like, hey, and I don't remember what it was exactly. I was like, hey, will I die if I run a marathon without training? And you were like, Unlikely. Yeah. One word response. And that was enough for me. It's like 2 days later, I was running a marathon without training because I trusted your judgment enough to. Unlikely was a good enough answer for me. But
I responded with unlikely, and then 2 weeks later, I see this like epic blog post come out, and I'm like, this is amazing.
That was really fun. It was painful after the fact, but it was really good. And what I actually found out about that is, when you're running on a quarter mile, because I did the marathon on a quarter mile track, if you don't run on the inside lap, like we ended up running like 30 miles. And someone didn't tell me this until like months after the fact.
Oh, that the 400 is just the inside.
Yeah, because we ended up, it doesn't matter if you're running like a mile, but when you're running 26.2, it starts to add up. And we started with like a couple people who were running it, and then it was just me and one guy running. And we were running in like the third and fourth lane for the majority of the time. And it ended up being way more than a marathon. We're like, oh, well, whatever. We still ran a marathon, that's cool. But so I would kind of want to get your opinions on that because you knew my training for the most part. So what are your thoughts on training, having to train long for marathons? I know people who've done they'd spend all day Saturday running because they had a marathon coming up and stuff.
Yeah, man.
So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's. Can you go out and do the traditional long slow distance training plan you find on the internet? That it's a linear progression, right? It's 3 miles, 4 miles, 5 miles, 8 miles, and then week 2 is 4 miles, 5 miles, 6 miles, 8 miles, and then it goes up 10% every week, right? And then it backs off 15%, and then goes up 10% every week. It backs like that. It works. That model works, right? But do you get the most bang for your buck, right? Like, if you could lift a barbell 1 time a day and get cloak off strong, right? Why would you do it more than that? Right. It's just, it's a stimulus response type thing. Like if there's a better way to do it, like, which we think our method, with CrossFit Endurance is a better way to do it. Why not do that instead? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right. And if you read any of Brian's stuff, you read his new book, Unbreakable Runner, or any of the Power Speed Endurance, like, he's not like the hardcore heretic that like the run bloggers make him out to be. He's just like, I've tried that program, and then I tried our program, and I got the same results. So why would I not run 30 hours a week less, feel way better, and still be way fitter and stronger and get the same result?
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So both ways work, right? We're not saying one way doesn't work. We're just saying that one way is maybe a little bit more optimal for the vast majority of, recreational and even like kind of hardcore amateur endurance athletes, right? And that's what we're seeing, right? We're getting people. And if you look at it from like the science back, like it makes a lot of sense too, right? Like when you finish that marathon, right? You said you ran 2 total miles in a year, right? Maybe
Yeah.
dedicated, right? Like when you finish that, 26 to 30 mile run that you did, like were you gasping for air? Was like did you feel like you do at the end of Fran or at the end of like a short like hard metcon?
Definitely not. No.
So it's not a cardiorespiratory endurance issue, right?
Right.
Like it's not an aerobic capacity issue. Like you've got the aerobic capacity to go run a marathon like right now because you did it, right? Like you proved like that you did it, right? So so what's the problem? Like what did you feel at the end of the next couple days, next week?
I mean,
right?
the next couple of days, my knees were kind of blown out, but other than that, I was.
Yeah, it's a strength conditioning issue, right? Like you're the structure supporting the knees and around the knees, and it was probably just from all the repetitive loading of the lower legs and stuff that were just put a lot of stress on your knees. That was the weak chain that kind of you felt the symptom in, but it was a strength conditioning issue, right? Yeah. When you see people who have to like walk down the stairs backwards for a week after their marathon, or like they barely hobble across the finish line, like that is not an aerobic issue, right? So why do I need to go spend more time in the oxidative pathway? Like I just don't. It doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Yeah. And then if you really dig into some of the science and stuff, and I can send you papers, and research reports and just stuff I've written for school and whatnot, if there is, and the science strongly suggests that there is a VO2 max kind of genetic limit, right, for people, right? Like it doesn't matter how much you train, like you're not going over 65, right? Because that's your genetics just aren't going to allow it, right? Like the only way you get faster is if you increase your aerobic power, right? Like you have to, which means you have to just go faster, right? You have to improve running economy and utilize a higher percentage of that VO2 max for a longer period of time. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So but that comes from taxing those other energy systems. Do you know what I'm saying? Like if you don't know how to suffer and go hard, like you're never going to be able to suffer and go hard, even when it's, from a physiological standpoint, relatively lower intensity because you're going super, super long or, long duration.
So would you say that VO2 max is not necessarily the best indicator?
No, it's really not, right? Because if your VO2 max is, 10 points higher than mine, right? But my running economy is better, right? And if you look at the curve, I could run a faster pace, or I could run the same pace and go longer than you could just because I have better running economy, right? So you got to look at the curves, and running economy and VO2 max like really matter. So if I'm more economical as a runner, which is what we teach, right? We teach the skill of running, right? And then can we maintain that skill under that hardcore intensity, right? And then if you can, then let's add the volume, right? Like that's how you get better at running, right? As opposed to just suffering more and going longer.
Right. And that was always my problem with running is, I don't know, just like running longer didn't seem appealing to me. Is like, why do I have to train for the suck? Like, I feel like mentally I'm ready for the suck. Like, why do I need to just keep training for it, Yeah, I feel like everything else is there and ready, so...
Yeah, and I tested it, you know what I'm saying? And like in the Marine Corps, I was running a 5K essentially, right? 3 mile run for the PFT. Mm-hmm. And I didn't do the tempo or time trial that I programmed every single weekend. I did the short interval and the long interval, right? Tuesday and Thursday every week, and I went out and I ran a 17:55 5K. Nice. Which is not blazing fast, but it's fast for a guy who could do 26 to 28 rounds of Cindy, 22 to 24 rounds of Cindy with body armor on, plus deadlift 400 pounds, which isn't a ton of weight, but again, it is for a guy who's 165 pounds and runs a sub 18-minute 5K, right? Back squat 340, right? Like, so like overall fitness was like pretty darn high. Plus I was not injured. I was feeling good, great energy, and I could still like go out and have a life because I wasn't training like a maniac, right. 40 hours a week, like a lot of these athletes do.
And so, I mean, adding strength to these programs of endurance, I mean, that's a question I get all the time, and something we kind of just hit on is, and you kind of said that was my main issue, strength and conditioning issue, the knees or whatever. But
Yeah.
I mean, if you wanted to add strength training in a serious way to an endurance program, I mean, what's the best way to go about doing that?
Yeah, so it really depends on the athlete, for the most part. Like, if the athlete's super weak, which we see with a lot of like reformed long, slow distance endurance athletes, where they're just like, I'm 42 years old and I can't run anymore, and and you look at them, they can't squat, they're the TJ Murphy story, right? The guy who wrote the Unbreakable Runner book with Brian, like he's the editor of Competitor magazine, whatever, right? Like he's like he was a big guy, and he was running like 240, marathons. Like that's pretty quick for an old guy.
Yeah.
And like he was just like, I just can't run anymore. Like I guess I have to quit, right? And he was like just a complete like hobbled mess. And then he started working with Kelly, he started working with Brian, and all of a sudden he like started learning how to move better. Right. And then Kelly taught him, like, helped him get into the positions he needed to get into and worked on that kind of mobility. Brian helped build him up kind of strength conditioning wise and taught him how to run, using, CrossFit Endurance, and, kind of what we teach, which is the pose method. And all of a sudden, like the repetitive injuries that he had his whole life, his whole running career, like went away. Right. And he started kind of he could run again, essentially. Right. You just kind of fix this guy who couldn't squat, a 95-pound barbell, which, your audience would probably just like, that doesn't even, like, what, that you don't even warm up with that. Right.
Yeah.
But like you look at these runners, like you think Lance Armstrong could get under like a 2 times body weight back squat, like the guy would collapse. Right. But aerobically, he'd crush anybody in the room. Right. Like his engine will never quit. But if you make him jump on a 30-inch box 5 times, like he'll probably have some stress fractures, right? Like,
right.
So it really depends. So adding strength to a program, it depends on how kind of weak the athlete is. We program conjugate stuff on CrossFit Endurance just because we like the constantly varied kind of model, and because these guys just need a little extra strength. If you were to come to me and say like, hey, I want to like train CrossFit Endurance seriously, like I wouldn't have you do 3 extra days a week of strength. Like you're pretty strong. I might make just some of the regular workouts, the CrossFit workouts, a little heavier for you, and then really work on you with the running stuff. So that's you see where like it really depends on who the athlete is and how you add it in there, and then you just stick with the basics, right? Like back squat them, front squat them, deadlift them, right? Have them do just some shoulder press, some push press, right? Maybe some power cleans if they can actually move fairly well, right? Like it doesn't need to get fancy, right? They don't need to be doing complicated EMOMs with it's squat snatches and everything. I said that because most people, if I say snatch, they're like, what kind of snatch? Sorry. So I started saying squat snatch. No, I hate that because it's just a snatch, right? So like people just try to overcomplicate things and they're like, oh, I need to be doing conjugate, or I need to be doing Wendler, I need to be doing whatever, right? And your post that you just put out, like, what strength program should I use, right? It was awesome, right? Because it's just like, who are you, right? Like, like you probably need something a little bit more complicated than like 5x5 back squat, right?
Yeah.
Add 5 pounds, do that twice a week, right? Like that's going to get a traditional endurance athlete pretty darn strong compared to where they're at, right? And it might get you strong for about a week and a half, and then you're gonna be like, I've got to do something else, right? And then you're like, nah, right? So, so don't overcomplicate it, right? The 5x5 stuff works, like if it's structured correctly, like these guys aren't gonna get big and bulky, right? Like I've been CrossFit for 8 years. Look how bulky I am, right? I'm 170 pounds because I was in Vegas this weekend, right? So, right, and I'm usually running around at 165, right? Like you don't get big and bulky, unless you're bodybuilding, right? Essentially. Yeah. I mean, and one man, one barbell is not bodybuilding, right? You'll put some size on if you're super skinny, but like it's not super high volume stuff. And CrossFit's higher volume, but it's kind of lower weights. So, like you just, like that doesn't really matter for the most part. So focus on the basics, you know what I'm saying? And then, 2-3 days a week of some strength stuff if you're really starting from a deficit as far as strength goes, and just stick to do a bench press, squat, deadlift, right? And then just mix that stuff up so you don't get bored, and keep it simple. 5x5, stay on that for 4 weeks, deload, or 3 weeks, deload for a week, and then change it to a front squat, a sumo deadlift, and a floor press. There's another 4 weeks of training for you, right? Yeah. So that's what we recommend.
I think that's great. And then, so the mobility thing that you mentioned kind of towards the beginning, is that something you think that primarily runners struggle with, or
It's everybody.
I've seen everyone definitely, like, no one, well, unfortunately, no one really comes to the gym like with great mobility. But do you find that runners like who have been in the endurance field for too long, or I don't want to say too long like it's a bad thing, but who have been in the endurance field for a long time struggle with mobility more than other people when it comes to the strength training?
Yeah, absolutely, and we're seeing it with the rowers that Brian and Erin are working with, and Erin herself. That like every 12 weeks they would be injured, right? Like they would break a rib on one side, repetitive, like every four.
Yeah.
Right. It's just, and they're like, yep, that's how, and the coach is right. That's how you adapt. You'll be good. And now like, which is insane, right? Like really? I mean, and it is, well, I mean, you look at it, right, like 85%, right? Like the most recent like study, I think came out of Harvard, right? 85% of runners report being injured in a given year, right? Like 85%, right? Like if 85% of people got injured squatting to the toilet every year, like there would be some sort of contraption in every bathroom across America, right? Like it just, right? Or they would cushion the toilet seat more, right? Like they did with running shoes. But like it's just like it's insane. And it's just like what is going on, right? There's obviously a problem, right? Like it's not a piece of technology, right? It's not like I need a different shoe or I need this brace on my knee, or like that's what's crazy about it. Like, and this is like the big aha, like that Kelly Starrett really helped me with back in 2010 before he was Kelly Starrett, really, right? Under his videos, like it was before he was doing his videos, and it was just like, where, like, what is where's the source of this problem? Right. And 9 times out of 10, it comes back to mobility with people. They're in bad positions or they're trying to get into positions, but things aren't moving correctly. Like just if you're super tight on one side, right, because you're a one-sided athlete, you're a thrower, right, or you row one side of the boat, or you sit at a desk because you're a desk athlete, right? Like you're gonna have these problems, and and it's all mobility related, and you see it all the time. Like I got a buddy who's working out with me now every morning. So it's way past my bedtime right now because I'm up at 4:30 every day to work out, and so he was a tennis player, like not competitively, like competitively, but not not like after college and not like pro or anything. But he plays tennis all the time, and like lateral movement, he's got no problem with. But like I back squatted him one day, and his like quads were blown up, his low back, like he was overextended, like but he's also an engineer that sits at a desk and commutes 2 hours a day, So
yeah.
What is the problem? Was the back squat dangerous? Is that why his low back hurts? Like, no, right? Like, because we didn't get over 100 pounds the first session just because I wanted to see how he moved with some weight on his back, and like, and he was smart enough to, and he was just like, no, I'm like, this is what you need to do. And I gave him a lacrosse ball and I showed him how to I put him through my hip mobility drill that I love giving out. And, it's like, voila, problem solved. Right. And, we back squat again today, and he added 20 pounds to the bar and was feeling good and was moving better and started having kind of some of that proprioception. Like he knew where his body was at, right? Like the kinesthetic awareness, right? And he's like, oh no, knees caved in. Oh, I gotta get back to my hand. And he started cleaning up, right? He started cleaning up his technique, and that was in like 2 sessions. And it was just because he's aware of like, hey, listen, like you sit all day long, you need to stop. Right. Like you need to, and if you are going to sit all day long, because you have to, like, you need to work on getting turned around because it's going to break you.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it all comes down to mobility, and you see it with runners as well, right? You do the same thing, which is just go out and log miles without really worrying about your positions or anything like that. The body breaks down. You've seen it, right? Military bases, right?
Mm-hmm.
The guys run at lunch, not because they want to, right? And they're just like, and their heads are back, and they're just look so painful. It's because it is, right? Like they're in bad positions. It's actually painful. So,
and I think that's a great way to get into the next topic that I wanted to talk to you about, is that like running form, and and nothing, and by no means, I mean, I've worked with you a little bit here and there at different the camps we've been to together, but I'd really like to know kind of your opinion, and I know you can't get too detailed in like giving anyone on this podcast like detailed instructions without showing them, but maybe kind of describe your opinion on what the best method for running is, and maybe some resources that people could utilize to try it out.
So like shameless plugs, yes, come out to a CrossFit Endurance seminar, contact PJ. No, so yeah, man. So running is a skill. Right, that's how we approach running with CrossFit Endurance. Right, running is a skill, and you can do it wrong. Right, like it's not like it is natural, right? Until it's not anymore, right? Like your son's 2, right?
Right.
And he probably runs around like crazy, right?
Yeah.
Right. And if you film him, right, and if you have film, right, and you have coach's eye film like I do of my 20-month-old baby right now, and then my kids when they were younger too, my older kids when they were younger too, because I'm a weirdo and I film my kids running around. They run very well.
Yeah.
Right. They run exactly how we teach adults to run. Right. But then what do? We put them in cute shoes and we let them sit in desks at school and they watch TV and they play on the iPads and they start doing these things and getting out of these kind of natural positions. And all of a sudden they start running into these problems again. Mm-hmm. Right. And then now I got film on my daughter and she can run like she'll be 7 next month or in a week and a half. And she runs 2.5 miles with me to my parents' house to like have pancakes at grandma's. Right. Like, and she crushes it. Right. And she loves it. But you film her and she's heel striking and she's pushing off and she's a mess, right? And it's not because she has a bad running coach, because I'm pretty awesome, but it's because she's just out there and she's just, like she's just in these positions now because it's just who she became from kind of life in general and shoes and clothes and school and sitting and that kind of thing. So anyway, there's a tangent about kids, right? So it's a skill, right? Just like a deadlift, a back squat, pull up, any of that kind of stuff is a skill, and you need to teach it, and you can do it wrong, right? And you can do it wrong for a long time until it hurts, right? You've probably seen some atrocious power cleans in your lifetime, right? Or some atrocious power, like anyone who's familiar with the workout Randy, right? 75 pound power snatches for time. Okay. How do those reps look?
Pretty awful.
Right. Pretty awful,
Overtime.
but it's only 75 pounds, and you can get it done like 7-10 minutes, right? Depending on how fast you're moving, and it's not a big deal, for most, fit-ish people, so they can buffer that, right? Like, and you see it at the games, you see people and they're in atrocious positions, right? If you looked at like the Open last year, the CrossFit Games, some of the televised workouts, like I saw some real sketchy deadlifts from people who were like big name athletes. And right. I think without getting into detail, right. And, but they survived, right. And you can survive it until you can't anymore. And that's what we're seeing. And that's why we get a lot of people at seminars that are, they're just like, I'm sick of being injured and I think I need to learn how to run now. And you're just right. Like, it only took you 25 years to,
welcome.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And they're like, I can't do that drill because my Achilles might pop off my heel. And you're like, okay, let's put you over here, because they're a mess. So, but that's the deal, right? Like if we're in bad positions, if we're not moving well, then we're more likely to get injured, right? Eventually. Right. And it's just a matter of your genetics and how strong you are and how, durable your body is and your kind of anatomy and physiology is before it happens. Some people get hurt right away. Some people get away with real shitty movement for a long, long time, but it'll get them eventually. Right. It'll get them eventually. So, that's the big thing, right? It's just, running technique, is a skill that you need to learn, you need to teach. We teach the pose method. It's basic biomechanical movement. It's rooted in physics, and it takes into the fact that like gravity, which is everywhere, is you're moving through and within that kind of gravitational field, right? So, if you work against it, you're doing something wrong, right? So if I'm pushing off, I'm working against gravity, right? Like I'm driving my body weight this way, finish line's that way, gravity is always going this way. If I'm pushing this way, I'm wasting energy, right? So why not just use gravity to kind of move my center of mass in as horizontal of a direction as possible? But that's the bottom line, right? I mean, I don't want to nerd out on pose for the next 3 hours on here, but because you're like an hour behind me or something, so it's probably already late. But so good position, get in good positions, fall and use gravity, and then just you just change the support, pull your feet off the ground, right, and let yourself keep falling is kind of the method we teach.
All right, yeah, and I'll put some links in the show notes for the pose method and then some stuff that you have. I think it's great. I haven't had a lot of, let's say, formal coaching on the pose method, but something I always think about when I'm running. I'd actually like to get analyzed again to see if I'm doing it well, since I haven't had a lot of coaching, but I do feel like it helps helps a lot. So
Yeah, and you need to. I mean, you really need to. You really need to get someone to videotape you and then send it in, and someone who knows what they're doing, pose coaches, stuff like that, or CrossFit Endurance coaches, through Project Endurance or whatever. And we can definitely take a look and give you some tips to let you know what you're doing wrong. And a lot of people are just like, I feel like I'm okay, and then you slow them down and you kind of tell them, and like you don't have to tell them what they're doing, and they're like, oh my god, that looks painful, right? And you're like,
Right.
yeah, like
it
that's
might
eventually,
be.
yeah, it's eventually going to get you,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's awesome. I'm going to go ahead and ask you about the whole, the method to your madness and programming, because we're talking about all that stuff for CrossFit Endurance and military athletes and all that stuff. Kind of, you mentioned conjugate. You said you guys get conjugate, and you're talking about conjugate with strength as far as doing, max effort days and dynamic effort days and all that stuff. And then I don't know. I just kind of want to know your theories, your ideas behind programming for those types of athletes, because it's definitely different than programming for someone who wants to be the strongest they can possibly be, or you're not training for the specialist. So I just want to kind of get your ideas on and your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, you're training for very good athletic prowess in all of the domains, right? Like you don't get to be just the strongest dude, because usually the strongest dude is also the biggest dude. And then if you're the biggest dude in the military world, right? If you're the biggest dude, like, yeah, that's cool until you get shot, and like the small dude has to pick your big ass up and carry you away, right? Like, so it's not always beneficial to be the biggest guy, right? So, so program for those guys, I mean, it's tough, right? Because there's so many different jobs, there's so many different, kind of goals, and then there's so much ego in everything that everyone does, right? Like, which, I'm sure if you've been to a lot of newer CrossFit gyms and you've seen a lot of that stuff come out. So that's one thing. Another big kind of issue is just those guys like shiny objects, right? So they'll bounce around from program to program, and they'll never try anything long enough to actually make it work. Anything with a cool name or, that will get them some street cred, right? They'll jump to, and that's not just specific to military athletes. I'm sure you've seen that with everybody, right? If you don't do the program, right. Or if you do like 4 weeks of the program, you're just like, well, that was great, but they got something better over here. And you're like, well, how about you, like that was one cycle, dude. Like, let's pump the brakes and let's put some work into this thing, so it really depends. Again, it goes back to the cop-out answer. It depends on the athlete, right? Like everyone out there, from what I've seen, doing some market research and stuff for a strategic athlete, like everyone's looking for, like the Jim Jones, like 3-month operator program, or they're looking for one of Rob Shaw's like military athlete like training plans, right? And that those, like I said before, the 6, 12, 18-week programs, like they'll work, but it's not like a magic pill, right? It's not like, voila, you're a Navy SEAL, right? Like because you did this 12-week program that prepared you for buds. Like the programs exist, so those results don't really exist, right? Like the people who are finding the most success in those programs are the people who are going to be successful probably anyway. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
Like it just, and you've probably seen it a little bit in the Air Force, special operations community. Like they're different people, those guys that are successful, so, you got to look at the big picture, and you got to know what you need to do. Like if you're training for a specific event, right? Like, special forces assessment selection, or buds, or, the dev group selection, or any specific kind of high level kind of tier 1, tier 2 kind of selection, that guy's going to get a different program than the guy who's past that already, right? Or the guy who doesn't care about going to that at all. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like they're very, like everybody wants to do like the Navy SEAL workout, but like but most of it's just crap. Like you don't, it's just, have you done SEAL Fit? Have you
I mean, I've done some, I would say they're workouts. I've never just stuck with it.
Did you ever how long did you do it?
Probably like 3 weeks.
Yeah, I lasted 2 weeks, and I was like, this volume is insane.
Excessive volume, like 3-hour workouts.
Oh yeah, it was,
yeah.
And I had the time, right? Like, because I was in the military, and I could, I was my own boss, so whatever, right? Like I had the time, but like, the volume was nuts, right? And like if you like, and it's good stuff. And like I could absolutely, if I was a college kid again, doing that and just eating good food and sleeping the rest of the day and going to classes occasionally, like I could probably buffer that volume and I'd be a monster at the end of it, right? But like that's not for everybody, right? Like that's not a program that everybody can do for a long period of time without ending up kind of broken and messed up. So you got to understand your individual needs and goals and that kind of thing. And that's why I kind of got like I've got some cool wins. Like I've got a team 6 guy, right, that I trained through all the selections and stuff, and he just crushed it during the selection. Like he was concerned because he was a little bit bigger than some of the other guys, and like he wasn't as fast as some of the like smaller, whippier guys. And I'm like, but you're good. Like this is this thing's 9 months long. Like you're like, don't worry. Like you need to survive. Like you need to be the most durable all around athlete out there. You don't need to be the guy that wins the one run, the one time, right? Like you need to be able to be the guy who comes in 4th every single time for 9 straight months, right? Or whatever, because that's going to make you number 1 overall. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And he ended up just crushing it. He graduated that selection, that 9-month pipeline, like 2 months ago now, I think. So pretty cool. So, but everyone's trying to train the guy who shot Bin Laden, right? Everyone wants to be like the guy who, right? And it's just like, but there's millions of other military athletes who just don't have anything. Right? Like standard daily unit PT is crap, right? Like it was when I was in, until I took it over. Like it probably was for all the units that you were around until someone smart kind of took it over. And that's what I've been trying to kind of work through and get people, amped up about, good, kind of solid training for those guys. So, but yeah, so, it really depends on the athlete. We need a program for the generalist, right? In and the majority of military guys, not just the special forces dudes. So with that said, like how do we program for them? One, you got to get them strong, right? I think everyone knows that. That's kind of a no-brainer. You got to build that work capacity up, right? The dirty word is CrossFit, right? Nowadays, but I mean, it's basically, I don't care what you call it, right? But just get fitter across all those kind of 10 general physical, preparedness domains, right? And then they need endurance, right? And we're not just talking about cardiorespiratory stuff. We're talking about muscular endurance as well, right? Because as cheesy as the physical fitness tests are, and they're all bullshit. Sorry, you're getting an explicit thing if you post this on iTunes now, right? Sorry. They still have to pass the tests, right? And like, what is the vast majority of the Haze Fests that are selections, or the unit PTs, or the physical fitness tests, right? It's like, can you do a whole bunch of push-ups in a little bit of time? Can you do a whole bunch of sit-ups? Can you do a whole bunch of pull-ups, right? So you need that muscular endurance as well, but then you also need it, right, along with that work capacity, because if you're out for 3 days and you're not sleeping and, you're eating MREs, which are super paleo, and then all of a sudden, like, you're in a firefight, like, you need to be able to kind of get off the X and get in and do your job and get out of there again without being completely wrecked. And that's where we talk about kind of some durability stuff as well, where we'll start ramping up the volume on some body weight stuff, ramp up the volume on, some longer runs, maybe some longer weighted runs at a super low intensity, that kind of thing. And then the 5th thing, right? So we had strength, work capacity, kind of endurance from both perspectives. Durability, everyone talks about durability, but it basically just means you're going to survive, right? Like you can go and you can do a 24-hour, even if you're not a military guy, right? You can go do a 26-hour go ruck event like an idiot and be fine and be like, okay, we're done with, burpees. Great. I can probably do more. I don't want to, because it sucks real bad, but like, I'm not completely wrecked. Like I can still like get in my car and drive home and feel sorry for myself. Right. So you need some of that durability, and then just, like we briefly talked about, mobility, flexibility. Right. And then kind of that, those activation type things, right? Some of those rehab things, we need to be able to fire the proper muscles in the proper order through those full ranges of motion in order to properly move and stay strong and stay injury free and not start compensating for things and whatnot. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah.
Yeah. So So that's a lot of stuff, right? But I mean, it's not as, when you look at it from a smarter, not harder kind of standpoint, you don't need to crush somebody with a tremendous, like 3 hour workouts. Do you know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
if you're doing it right, that's a lot of stuff. Maybe you're looking maybe an hour and 15 minutes a day. And then a couple of days a week, you're doing a second workout. That's that kind of endurance piece where, you're doing some longer durations or some intervals or some ruck intervals or whatever, right? But what you don't have is 5 mile runs every Thursday and 3 mile runs on Tuesday, and right, and just that
Right.
stupid high volume stuff. Because you're like, oh, I got a 3 mile run in the PFT. I just need to go out and run 5 miles. You're like, what?
Why? Yeah.
Right? And it just doesn't work. And I've seen it. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because I've converted some of those, kind of old thinkers to the CrossFit way. And then when it came up to PFT time, they're like, nope, sir, I'm going out to run 4 miles. And it would just be like, all right, good luck with that. Like I'm going to go run, 10 by 100 meters out on the street over here. Then I'm going to go and eat, and they come back and they're like, they're sweaty, but they're not, and I'm just crushed, right? Like I can barely walk up the steps to the office because like I just did a Tabata treadmill workout or something stupid. And, and it's like, hey, guess what? I'm getting faster. You're staying the same. Like maybe you're, like definition of insanity is, right? Like,
Yeah.
what are you doing? So if you put it together smart, right? And if you think about all those things, right? What did we say? We said strength. We said work capacity stuff, right? Functional movements, right? We said endurance, right? And then we added in some kind of durability, so maybe some higher volume accessory kind of work. Because you need to specialize a little bit for the military guys for the kind of higher volume body weight type stuff. A little bit of mobility and flexibility, which everybody should be doing every day, like all the time anyway. And like that program looks real similar to CrossFit Endurance in the way they program, right? Obviously there's some, some workouts need to change, some endurance pieces need to change, but like that's what really got me hooked on the CrossFit Endurance model. Cause I'm not a marathon runner. Right? Like I'll run some trails, I'll do some dumb events, but I'll also go and suffer with the go ruck stuff like you talked about before. So the other day. So
Yeah.
or I think it's on the list too, right?
Yeah, and that's actually what I wanted to talk about, because you're talking about military athletes and how they some of them are just like different than others. It doesn't matter kind of what program you're following. They just have a different mindset, and that's something that's really big in everything that I kind of write about and do is mental toughness. And I know that, and I don't actually know the specifics. I just know that like every time I email you, you're getting ready for like a go ruck event or something. So what is your take on doing these go ruck events or challenges and building mental toughness in?
Yeah, man. I've always said, and it's funny because I was an armor guy, right? So my weapon carried me, right? I was on a 7-ton tank with a turbine engine. Like I didn't have to walk anywhere. Right, I had more weapons on me than infantry company, and and I didn't have to carry anything. Right, so but every Marine or rifleman type stuff like we did through training, 15, 12, 10-mile hikes with packs on our back. Right, so I hands down, I said it then, and no one would listen to me or go on a hike with me after I got to tank school, and I'll say it now, like. Rucking, right, or just putting heavy shit on your back and just going out and spending alone time with yourself in your own head, right. is the way to just build people who are super mentally tough, right? Like because you're just in your own head the whole time, and it's crazy in your head, right? Like you start doing some real long, real crappy stuff that like and like you start talking to yourself in weird ways that people don't know, and that's really, if you don't get broken right at these selections, if you're good enough to get there and do well on like the initial screening physical fitness test, and you don't get broken, that's the make or break marker of people, right? That's why you see when you get to the tier 2, tier 1 kind of guys, right? They're all kind of the same, right? And they're all like super weird compared to like the rest of the Air Force, right? The rest of the Marine Corps, the rest of the Army, right? They're very different personalities, but like they're all kind of the same because, it takes a certain type of person who can kind of weather that storm, which is their own kind of psyche, and kind of push through it. So the go ruck things have been fun, man. I enjoy them. Like how do you enjoy like paying somebody to like basically haze you like it's boot camp for 12 hours or 26 hours was the last one I did. It ended up being, right? Like, how do you do that? Like, like you just, it's fun to go. I like it as a coach because I get to see where people quit. And that's interesting to me. Especially with some competitive athletes, some competitive CrossFitters that we coach, like it's interesting to see like the mental battles they go through. Because anyone who's spent any time coaching like knows that there's a huge kind of psychology piece that you need to, right? Like if you haven't been on the phone with like one of your serious athletes and like talking them down off the ledge, like, no, it'll be, no, you can take a day off. No, I know. Yes, your mother died. It's so you can have a couple days off for that. Like it'll be okay. Right. Like it's just like, pump the brakes, right? Like, so I like seeing some of that stuff, but yeah, I mean, you put a heavy weight on your back, and it's cool because like with the GoRuck stuff, like you don't have military. Like, what are you gonna do? You have to be there, right? Until they like, unless you're like buds, and then they're like, go quit. Like that's fine. Like we want you to quit. Go ahead and quit. But like the rest of it, like you don't get to just like, no, I'm done on this hike. And like the rest of the company's like got 11 miles to go, right? Like that doesn't work out real well for you. Here you can quit with no consequences. Yeah. So it's easy to quit if you want to, right? Yeah. So that adds an extra kind of layer, right? There's no like forced obligation to be there, right? Especially in the beginning when like you're not really a team yet, because they're all team events except for the selection, and everyone's kind of trying to pull you along, and they'll take your pack and they'll help you out, and they'll carry the weight for you and stuff to get you back on your feet. But yeah, they're a lot of fun, and I think they're great for building some mental toughness, because especially the longer one, like especially the heavy, which I just finished. I can show off my. Right, you get the heavy.
Nice.
So that's what you get, right? You pay $150 and you get a patch if you survive.
Right.
4 Green Berets hazing you for 26 hours.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, it's something that people who aren't going in the military or aren't in kind of the combat arms realm of any of the military branches will never see. They'll never experience that kind of thing. Like maybe they get it a little bit at basic training or boot camp or something like that, but even that's hit or miss depending on the services and stuff. So I think it's huge. I think it's huge for mental toughness.
Yeah, and I think it's
just to learn about yourself.
And that's one of my biggest things and one of the things I always challenge people to do is what I call the no motivators workout, which nowhere near the same level of a GoRuck or military training, but the no motivators workout is no music, nothing, like if possible, like a completely blank white walled room with just you and a barbell. Yeah. And it doesn't really matter what it is. If you want to do 30 snatches for time or whatever, just challenge yourself with nothing motivating you but yourself, and actually get to meet yourself. Because most people never do. And I mean, it's kind of unfortunate, but like some people never truly get to meet themselves. And if they start to meet themselves in that really uncomfortable situation, then they just shy away or quit or whatever. But yeah, I think that you make a really good point of just the only way to really do that is to go there, put yourself in that situation and see what happens. So
yeah, for sure. And I mean, I saw it because as busy as I am, like I'm like, all right, this thing starts with like the PT test. Like there's a 12-mile ruck that it starts with, and you got to do it in under 3.5 hours. Or they can drop you if they want to, right? And I'm like, I don't have 3.5 hours to go out and like practice this thing. Like I just don't have that time. So like I think the longest like kind of training ruck I did like a 90-minute thing, and like I left at like 9:30 at night on like a Friday, right? And was just like out in the dark wandering around my neighborhood with, with like 55 pounds on my back, and like I was like this, and I had like I don't think I had headphones or anything. I was just like, this is awful, right? and then I got out there. And I get out there and I was like, and then I get on this 12-mile thing, and there's people around you, and like you're talking, and like there's a goal, like, and you're like, I got to get it done. And like all of a sudden, like that 3 hours and 10 minutes it took me to do the 12 miles was like over,
right?
And you're like, no, I'm done, cool, right? And it felt like it went faster than the 90-minute thing I did on my own, because it's rough, if you don't know where, like, exactly like you said, if you don't know yourself, like it gets kind of rough and scary for people.
Yeah. And I think that's a great way to get the last kind of question. I'm going to be asking this So you are the first official episode of the Better Humanology podcast.
Oh, jeez.
So I would like to see what your answer is. I hope this doesn't turn into something cheesy. If it does, I'll cut it out. But you are the first person I'll ask. So what is your best advice you have for becoming a better human?
Yeah, this is a great question. I hope it stays in because it's really good, and I'd like to hear other people's take on this thing. I mean, mine is, and this comes from, owning my own businesses and kind of working for myself, which we talked a little bit in the, pre-interview, right?
Right.
When it's a scary thing to kind of be out there on your own and put yourself out there and be completely and 100% responsible for, putting food in your kids' mouths and a house over their heads and health insurance, right? Because that's the worst expensive of them all.
Yeah.
And you can't be scared to execute, right? Like, so, I mean, that's my advice. Like, you just got to go, and whatever it is, right? If it's, you want to make more money, go make more money. It's that easy. It really is, right? If you want to get fitter, right? If you want to lose that last 10 pounds, like, you just have to go do it, right? Everyone gets so hung up on all of the different tactics, all the different ways, all the different programs, all the different methods. And 90% of the time it comes down to there's something in your head that's stopping you from doing it. Right. And it's just like you've got to get past that kind of psychological barrier and just go out and execute and get the job done, whatever it is. Right. And again, like that's business advice for sure. And I went through that with my newest venture, which I don't know if we talked about on the podcast or not. Right. But I was like, I need to launch this thing in a month. And I'm sitting there at like 3 weeks and like 2 days. And I'm like, oh, and I'm fretting over this, like, just these little changes here and there to the weather. Right. And I'm just like, what am I doing? And then finally, like, I was just like, nope. And I was like, instead of going to bed that night and just like, no, I'll just finish it tomorrow. I was like, nope. And I cranked out the email to the list I had and I sent it. And then I went to bed and I was like, there it is. It's out in the world now. Right. And guess what? Everything worked out fine. Right. Like, and that's such a big kind of, because it's scary, man. Like, it's all scary. Right. Like, everyone's like, oh, I want to squat 1,000 pounds. Right. But like, if they ever get close, they'll scare the shit out of themselves. Right. Like, right. Like, it's because it's hard. So, whatever it is, right. Like, don't be scared. Just get out there and just execute, start taking steps to get to your goals, no matter what they are. And that's all it takes. Right. And you don't make a big thing about it. Stop fretting about all the little details and just go and do something, right. Go execute on something. And you'll definitely be a better human for sure.
That's awesome. I love that answer. Yeah, I really hope.
Cool.
I want to see kind of how they accumulate over time, and I think that was a great first answer. So, I really appreciate you doing the podcast with me today for Better Humanology. So, what's the best place for people to learn more about what you are doing or who you are and all that stuff? How can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so if you're in Phoenix, I'm in the Phoenix area. Best way is 623sc.com. It's kind of my personal blog / coaching site. So you can read a little bit more about me on there, connect with me there. I don't blog a lot because I'm super busy with other projects and stuff. But if you ever want to come train or whatever, that's a good place to get a hold of me. And then Strategic Athlete. I briefly mentioned it before. I don't want to shamelessly plug my own new business, but I'm pretty excited about it because it's all about helping. End of 3 fitness is fitness for the other guy, right? Like, right. Strategic Athlete. Like, I was thinking about this interview today, and I was thinking about that, and I was writing an ebook for it and stuff, and I was like, this is fitness for the other military guy, right? This isn't the Navy SEAL workout. This isn't the past the PFT that everyone's got a program that'll work. This is just general. Be more awesome. Be a better kind of military athlete, right? Strategic athlete, no matter who you are. If you're a supply guy that never gets out of the office, or if you're a guy who's, carrying people around in rucks and packs and guns and ammo. So strategicathlete.com. Check me out on there. What else? PJ at Strategic Athlete. I've got 15 email addresses. You want me to rattle them all off right now? No, right? And then Twitter, right? PJ_Newton, NEWTON. You can get me on there, or anything related to CrossFit Endurance. I run that whole show. So you send any email to any at CrossFit Endurance email address, it probably comes to my inbox, which is super fun every day.
Yeah.
So yeah.
All right, man, that's awesome. I think that's great. And just hitting on double tapping Strategic Athlete. I have checked it out. I think it's really awesome. I'm really excited about what you're doing, and looking forward to seeing that grow over time, because I think that is really awesome and something that's a huge missing piece for the other military person right now.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, man. Thank you a lot for being on the show, and that's it. Episode 1 done.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to the Better Humanology podcast. If you want to know about any of the resources we talked about, head on over to betterhumanology.com and check out the podcast show notes. Likewise, we have betterhumanology.com/toolbox, where you can find every resource that we've ever talked about on the podcast. So go check it out. Until next time, here's to becoming a better human.
Your best. Losers always whine about their best.